Christopher DeVink, in his book, The Power of the Powerless, tells a simple story. He writes, "One spring day, my 5-year-old son, David, and I were planting raspberry bushes along the side of the garage. A neighbor joined us for a few moments. David pointed to the ground. Look, Daddy, what's that?" I stopped talking with my neighbor and looked down. "A beetle," I said. David was impressed and pleased with the discovery of this fancy, colorful creature. My neighbor lifted his foot and stepped on the insect, and giving his shoe an extra twist in the dirt. "That ought to do it," he laughed. David looked up at me, waiting for an explanation or a reason. That night, just before I turned off the light in his bedroom, David whispered, "I like that beetle, Daddy." "I did too," I whispered back. DeVink concludes his story by saying, we have the power to choose. We have the power to choose. As human beings, we are both rational and emotional. We make choices every day. We choose what we have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, often making a choice depending upon how we are feeling at that moment. I often heard it to be said that one should not go grocery shopping while hungry for obvious reasons. At times, our emotional state and rational state of mind can be at odds with each other. How do we decide? Should we give in to pure emotion without due reason? A decision made based on pure emotion can turn out to be disastrous. Have you ever made a significant decision, whether it be moral, ethical, or perhaps make a purchase based on pure emotion and live to have buyer's remorse? I am sure that each of us has had that opportunity to be there more than we would like to admit. How do we make better and well-informed decisions? We cannot simply be reactionary, which is pure emotion. We need to respond. Our response allows reason to share in the decision-making process. With a balanced approach, better decisions are made. Whew. What's all that psychological word salad of emotion and reason all about? Actually, it is the process we employ each time we make choices. Remember the words, we have the power to choose. Remember, choices have consequences. The 6th chapter of the Gospel of St. Luke provides us with the Sermon on the Plain, with an opportunity to make a fundamental choice in making our response to the invitation to the gospel. Notice the strike contrast versus St. Matthew's version of the Sermon on the Mount. Most Christians are more familiar with the words spoken by Jesus on the side of the mountain. "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall inherit the land." On level ground, Luke wrote Jesus as saying, "Blessed are you who are poor, for the kingdom of God is yours." In the second half of the Lucan Beatitudes, we hear the contrasting reality. "But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation." The Gospel of Luke clearly displays the consequences of the choices made in light of gospel values. For each of the 4 blessed words, there are 4 woe words of consequences. Luke offers his listeners and us plain and unambiguous contrast for the choices each of us make in our response to the kingdom of God. As for myself, I'm reminded by the words of Moses, who responded to the grumbling Israelites upon their great exodus from Egypt. Moses said to the people in the book of Deuteronomy, "See, I have set before you this day life and good, and death and evil." Moses exhorted them to choose life, versus returning to the death of Egyptian captivity. The kingdom of God demands a response from each believer. In our supposed enlightened era of human history, true Christians are being challenged to the core of their being. Christians not ought approach the kingdom of God based upon a subjective view of political bent or a sort of cafeteria style of choosing what to keep and what to discard. The beatitude of St. Luke's gospel ought to send shivers down our spines. St. Luke does not mince his words. His words are clear with sharp contrasts that will either lead us to the kingdom or lead us away. Do Christians really want to return to slavery? Slavery to emotion, slavery to self-destructive behaviors, of not caring for the poor, the homeless, the hungry, and the thirsty? I do not believe they do. This week, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, wrote a letter to the bishops of the United States entitled Letter of the Holy Father Francis to the Bishops of the United States of America. Pope Francis' letter urges the Catholic bishops of the United States to actively protest the massive deportation of immigrants that has been initiated by the U.S. government. This new policy allows ICE officials to enter churches, schools, hospitals, and places of work to arrest many hard-working immigrants, our neighbors and our co-workers, for no other reason than being an immigrant, legal or not. Many immigrants are hardworking people who have never broken any laws. While the arrest of violent immigrants is noteworthy, the indiscriminate deportation of immigrants is morally corrupt and inherently evil. For example, what ever happened to the crisis in Springfield, Ohio, wherein the fake news accused Haitian immigrants of eating cats and dogs? Since the election, we've not heard one news article about the crisis in Springfield, Ohio. The harm that was inflicted by this conspiracy theory onto the hardworking legal immigrants was and is immeasurable. While time is limited today, I encourage all Christians to log on to www.usccb.org and read the entire letter written by Pope Francis. The charity of Christ demands a proactive response to the cruel and inhumane treatment that our brothers and sisters are presently experiencing. Remember these words: we have the power to choose. Do you choose to allow that little beetle to live? Or do you choose to stamp and twist the life out of it? Only you can decide.